At its cruising altitude, the SR-71 Blackbird flew so high that the pilots could see the curvature of the Earth. At its cruising speed, it covered a mile every 2 seconds. If a missile was fired at it, the standard procedure was not to take evasive action. The standard procedure was to accelerate. The SR-71 was faster than anything that could chase it. In 24 years of operational service, the Soviet Union fired more than 4,000 missiles at SR-71s. Not one hit. The only thing that ever destroyed an SR-71 was the United States government. The SR-71 did not begin as the SR-71. It began as a CIA program in the late 1950s called Oxcart, designed to replace the U-2 spy plane after Francis Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union in May 1960. The U-2 incident had been a diplomatic catastrophe. Eisenhower had publicly denied the United States was conducting spy flights over Soviet territory. Then the Soviets produced Powers, produced the wreckage of his plane, and produced his camera film showing exactly what he had been photographing. The CIA needed something that could not be shot down. Lockheed's Skunk Works division, the secret advanced projects division that had also built the U-2, was given the contract. The engineer who led the design was Kelly Johnson, considered by many aviation historians to be the greatest aircraft designer who ever lived. Johnson's team had one requirement above all others. The aircraft had to fly faster and higher than any missile or interceptor the Soviets could build. They succeeded beyond what anyone had believed was possible. The engineering problems Johnson's team solved to build the SR-71 were so fundamental that they had to invent solutions that did not exist anywhere in aviation. At the speeds the SR-71 was designed to fly, Mach 3.2, 3 times the speed of sound, air friction heats the aircraft skin to temperatures that would destroy aluminum. The entire airframe had to be built from titanium. There was a problem. The United States did not have enough titanium. The primary source of the titanium the United States needed was the Soviet Union. So the CIA created a series of front companies to secretly purchase Soviet titanium, which was then used to build the aircraft designed to spy on the Soviet Union. The Soviets sold it to them. At Mach 3, the titanium skin of the SR-71 heats to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The aircraft was so hot in flight that it could not be fueled on the ground in its normal state. The fuel would expand and leak. So, the SR-71 was deliberately designed to leak fuel on the ground. It took off, partially fueled, met a tanker aircraft immediately after takeoff, and refueled in the air after the airframe had expanded to its flight temperature and the seals had closed. Every SR-71 that ever flew left a trail of fuel on the runway before takeoff. This was not a malfunction. This was the design. The pilots who flew the SR-71 were among the most trained and selected human beings in the history of aviation. They flew in full pressure suits, similar to those worn by astronauts. At the SR-71's operational altitude of 85,000 feet, if the cockpit lost pressure, a pilot without a pressure suit would be dead in seconds. The aircraft flew so high that pilots could see stars during daylight hours. A mission profile typically began with takeoff from a classified airbase, immediate aerial refueling, acceleration to cruise speed and altitude, the reconnaissance run over the target country, return to friendly airspace, and landing. The entire mission from takeoff to landing might last 3 to 4 hours. In that time, the aircraft might have covered 10,000 miles. The cameras and sensors the SR-71 carried could photograph an area the size of 150,000 square miles in 1 hour. From 85,000 feet, the cameras could resolve objects 6 inches across on the ground. The Soviets knew the SR-71 was there. They tracked it on radar. They fired missiles at it. The missiles could not catch it. The SR-71 crew knew missiles had been fired because the aircraft's threat detection systems lit up. The procedure was to push the throttles forward. By the time any missile reached the altitude and position where the SR-71 had been, the aircraft was already 20 miles ahead. The existence of the SR-71 was classified at the highest levels. The pilots who flew it did not officially exist in their assigned roles. Their pay for those who flew CIA operational missions rather than Air Force missions came through a front organization. Lockheed employees who worked on the program signed secrecy agreements that prevented them from discussing their work with anyone, including their families, for decades. When Lyndon Johnson publicly acknowledged the existence of what he called the A-11 in February 1964, he gave away more information than the program's managers had wanted released. The announcement was made partly to explain aircraft that had been sighted near the Skunk Works facility in California, and partly for political reasons related to the 1964 election. The SR-71 designation itself was the result of a misstatement. When announcing the aircraft publicly, Johnson said SR-71 when the correct designation was RS-71 for reconnaissance strike. Rather than correct the President of the United States, the Air Force simply changed the aircraft's official designation to match what Johnson had said. The most advanced aircraft ever built was renamed because nobody wanted to tell the president he had misspoken. The SR-71 flew operational missions over North Vietnam, the Middle East, North Korea, Cuba, and along the borders of the Soviet Union. It was never shot down. It was never intercepted. No pilot flying an SR-71 on an operational mission was ever lost to enemy action. There were accidents. 12 SR-71s were lost over the program's life, all to mechanical failures or accidents rather than enemy fire. The aircraft was extraordinarily demanding to fly and unforgiving of errors. But in operational service, in the missions it was built to fly, over the territories of adversaries who desperately wanted to destroy it, the SR-71 was invulnerable. The intelligence it gathered was irreplaceable. During the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, the SR-71 provided real-time battle damage assessment that no satellite of the era could match. During crises in the Middle East and around the Korean Peninsula, when policymakers needed to know what was actually happening on the ground in denied territory, the SR-71 flew and brought back the answer within hours. No other system could do what it did. In 1990, the United States Air Force retired the SR-71. The official reason was cost. Each flight hour cost approximately $850,000 in 1990 dollars. The program cost approximately $275 million per year to operate. The intelligence community argued that no existing or planned satellite system could replicate the SR-71's combination of speed, altitude, and sensor capability. The aircraft could be over a crisis area within hours of a tasking order. Satellites followed fixed orbits that adversaries could predict and prepare for. The Air Force argued the money could be better spent elsewhere. The SR-71 was retired. 3 years later, during the Gulf War, military commanders repeatedly requested SR-71 reconnaissance missions over Iraq. They were told the aircraft had been retired. Satellite imagery and other reconnaissance systems provided what coverage they could. Commanders said afterward it was not the same. Congress voted to fund reactivation of 3 SR-71s in 1995. The Air Force accepted the funding and reactivated the aircraft. Then the Air Force retired them again in 1998, this time permanently, by refusing to budget for spare parts and support infrastructure. Congress had forced the reactivation. The Air Force found a way to end it anyway. The most capable reconnaissance aircraft ever built was destroyed not by Soviet missiles, but by inter-service budget politics. The last official SR-71 flight was on October 9, 1999. The aircraft that flew that final mission is now on display at the Air Force Flight Test Museum at Edwards Air Force Base in California. It still holds the world airspeed record for an air-breathing aircraft, Mach 3.3, 2,193 miles per hour, set in 1976. No aircraft built since has gone faster. The pilots who flew it are in their 70s and 80s now. Some of them have finally been able to talk publicly about what they did, now that the classifications have been lifted. They describe missions that sound like something from science fiction. Flying above the weather, above most of the atmosphere, watching the Earth curve below them, knowing that somewhere far below people were trying to kill them and could not. Kelly Johnson, who designed the aircraft that could not be caught, died in 1990. He did not live to see his creation retired. 4,000 missiles, not one hit. The United States Air Force did in 8 years what the entire Soviet military could not do in 24. It killed the Blackbird.
Thank you for watching this episode to the end. If you found it insightful, support the channel by subscribing. More analytical stories are coming soon.